Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Girl Woman. And this is part 2 on being 40-something with Darpna Tank. So we've talked a lot about parenting and relationships with others, and we've touched upon relationships with self. And that's where I would like to, that's where I'd like to go in part 2, because I'm really interested in Darpna's relationship with herself and how that has led her to be in tune with herself and make the changes as she's navigated life. So one thing, Darpna, as I told you before when we did the pre-call, that I did last year was I wrote a letter to my younger self. And I did it as part of an interview that I did with Too Much of a Person, where one of the questions that Diana posed to me was, what would you tell your younger self? And as I thought about it, I thought of so many things I wanted to tell my 12-year-old, 13-year-old self. And I found it a very moving experience to write. And I know that you also have written something to your teenage self. And I would really love to start to kick part 2 off by hearing that from you.
Oh, that's great. I'd love to share that with you, Lara. So on my Instagram, my work Instagram at DT Glow Therapy, this is one of the posts that I put up. It's a letter to my teenage self. To my teenage self, if life feels tough right now and you feel like giving up or just don't care anymore, I'm writing to tell you that everything worked out just fine. As your future self, I need you to know that you got through the tough times and it was worth it, as there have been countless incredible times. You have so much to offer the world. You are loved. I'm writing to remind you that you already have and know everything that you need to get through this. That day you decided to find ways to cope and decided to share what you had bottled up was the bravest thing you ever did. I thank you. Always remember, we are enough and we are loved, from your future self. And I wrote that because it reminded me.
Made me cry.
Oh, bless you. Oh. Oh, what did that do for you?
It's just so beautiful. I think it's the fact that when we hear words that we really want to hear from others, for me it represented that actually we have the words and we need to hear them from ourselves, right? Oh, it really touched me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And that's why I wrote it, because there are teenagers out there right now who are struggling with their exams, or they've finished their exams and they don't know what they're doing about university. They may not have even visited the university that they're supposed to go to. They don't know how the assessments work. There's so much going on out there, and it's completely different. But I remember being a teenager and having my own struggles. And if I had had me now, then, to reassure me, to say, at 43, you'll be fine. You'll have done so much. You'll have achieved so much. You will have ups and downs, and it all works out in the end. And so that's what I wanted to write for all the teens out there. But it was to myself. And my kind of intuitive journey in terms of communicating with myself started at about 16. I had a health scare, and at the time that was huge for me, and I was vulnerable and confused and really at a loss for what to feel, how to feel, and I had to find ways to cope,
to soothe yourself.
Yeah.
And what were the ways? Because we've talked about a couple of them. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you started developing that connection with yourself?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm sure you resonate with this, but when you're going through something intense, and for me it was really intense at the time, not only was I only a teenager inexperienced, immature, no tools or skills. Mental health wasn't really a thing then.
Wasn't even, yeah, it wasn't talked about really.
Yeah, but also at that point in time, you have a nucleus family that you live with, and they too are struggling with whatever is happening to their child. So there's a sense of not wanting to burden anyone else, and not wanting to add to anybody else's worries and things like that. So what do you do? And so for me, I just started writing. I don't know where it came from, but I put pen to paper and I began to write. And it was my way of saying out loud, so to speak, that which I could not cope with on the inside. It was an outlet, it was a method of kind of just saying it as it was. And it evolved very, very quickly. It didn't feel comfortable as a journal. So it turned into letters. So I wrote letters. And
did you have a practice where like you wrote every day, or was it was very spontaneous, like when you felt the need to write, you wrote because it was this outlet, it was sort of pouring out of you?
yeah, it was spontaneous. I can't think that far back, and I can only think that that's because it was being dealt with as it was going along.
Yeah.
And when things were very intense, I was obviously going really deep and questioning a lot of things, and the letters were sometimes to God. Why, where, when, what if not? All these things were coming out on paper, and that gave me strength. It gave me courage, and it gave me a method to communicate with myself, to reflect on what I felt and not have it trapped inside me, going round and round. And it was safe. And I thinking
That's
about it now, I wonder whether did I hide those letters? I can't remember. Were they just there? I'd like to dig them out actually if they're still around. So
it would be so interesting to
yeah.
actually, being in 40 something, then to be reading what you wrote as a teenager. It's kind of almost like discovering a whole new person, right?
And it didn't stop there. It continued. That situation came and went, and I was fine and I recovered and everything moved on. And yet this tool, this
Yeah.
strategy, it just grew and grew. And it wasn't as if I wrote all the time, and it wasn't as if I only wrote in difficult times. In my 30s, I began writing to my children. I began writing to them about my hopes and dreams for them, but also the intensity of how I felt about them, the little minutiae nuances of them as little people that I never wanted to forget. I kind of put those on in paper because I didn't know how to capture that, and I needed to be able to share that with them at some point in their lives, for them to know how amazing they were when they couldn't even communicate. So the letters are now in intense periods, difficult periods, but also about gratefulness, and about appreciation and about love and all sorts of other things as well. So it's kind of evolved with me and with age.
Writing is, I personally have found it to be a very profound tool for me. And it actually, I think, was the cornerstone to me developing my relationship with myself and forming my sense of self. And I started writing at the end of 2018. And I was doing morning pages, but it was any time of the day pages for me, but 3 pages of longhand, which is the Julia Cameron practice from the Artist's Way. And in doing that, I words were just pouring out of me. Feelings, everything. When you talked about things being trapped inside you, that's exactly how it felt. Where I felt like tense and like suffocated, and all of these feelings and thoughts swirling around. And when I started writing, it was like the dam broke, and there was a release, and I could, through writing, I began to hear my inner voice, like my true inner voice, not the inner critic that I'd internalized and absorbed, but my true inner voice. And that was how I really started being aware of my feelings and my emotions and my thoughts. And like you, I don't just write, when it's difficult. I also write, when it's good, because I want to remember the good. And I want to sort of like make sense of like the good as well, like in my brain. I mean, we're using very binary language, right? Good and bad, but make sense of like the joy and things that I've learned, or a moment that maybe was challenging to go through, but then I learned so much from it that I wouldn't change that moment. And actually on that, this is total segue, but hey, that's what conversation's about. I learned a new thing, and I don't know whether you know it either. So I learned, have you heard of type 1 fun, type 2 fun, and type 3 fun?
Oh, do share.
Okay, so I learned this literally 2 days ago. And so type 1 fun is the type of fun where whatever you're doing, it's fun, like in the moment. And then after, it's also fun, right? Okay. So I don't know, maybe going on a roller coaster or something, or going to the theatre, like something that you enjoy, and then you look back on it and you enjoy as well.
Yes.
Type 2 fun is it's hard in the moment. But then when you reflect back on it, you realize, oh no, it's like good after. And my cousin taught me this. He just came back from a 4-day backcountry hike. So like, with backpacks and camping and all of that, like, and so he was saying that in the moment, he was telling me about the challenging, the walking and the hiking and feet hurting and all of that. But now when he thinks about it, literally even like 1 day after it finished, when he was like, I could never do this again, he's realized how much the experience has changed him. And, and he's like, well, I think I will do it again. So he and his friends were saying that kind of experience, the challenging experience, is type 2 fun, which it made me think that that's what inner work is, right? Inner work is kind of type 2 fun. I know inner work is like work, but when you think about it, it's hard when you're going through it, but the rewards that you reap when you come through a particular challenge makes you then kind of, more often than not, look back and go, oh, actually, I wouldn't change anything, because now I'm at the place and I have the realization, or I have the relationship with myself that I'm at now. And so I wouldn't change that.
Yeah. And when you take that one step further, you get, and it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Perspective. Yeah.
Right? Because what I've always found is that the avoiding and the procrastinating and the
numbing,
shying away from is always much harder, more grueling and tiring than the actuality of facing it.
Isn't that a metaphor for life?
Right? So you can spend all that time thinking, I don't know, what will that bungee jump be like? And then the bungee jump is done and it was fine and everything was okay, and you spent weeks worrying about it and signing away your life and all the rest of it.
all the hard conversation that you're putting off.
And the hard conversations and the journaling comes into that, and the writing comes into that, because you can sit with it and you can write it and you can realize that while you're with it, you survived. And you're still breathing and you're still going. And it's past. And anything that you sit with passes if you allow it to stay. It's when you decide to move from it, and
when you're in resistance, when you're fighting it,
and it turns into other difficult feelings. Then you go from one difficult feeling to another one to another one. You stay with that one and see where it leads you, and writing can help you to do that.
And so, as well as writing, we were talking before about the mind-body connection, and the other way you'd said was sort of learning to meditate. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I did that a lot in COVID with Dr. Shefali. I was meditating every day for the first 3 months. But you started so much earlier, right? As a teenager, like that being still. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that was like for you, what you did, and how that has resulted in this very strong mind-body connection?
Yes. From an early age, I explained before that I've always been quite intuitive, and I've been quite an empathetic person innately. And that intuition helped me to kind of join the dots. So as a youngster, I would, get a lot of tummy aches, or get a lot of headaches, and realize that actually they disappeared if I was distracted, or if I was suddenly happy, or if there was something else changed in my state and I wasn't feeling so stressed or upset. And I began to understand that there was a real strong relationship either with my thoughts and how I felt in my body, or when something happened for me, it was more something happened in my body and it signaled to me there's something going on in my mind or in my feelings.
Okay.
And I saw that through the letters, because I would write about how I felt, the sensations that I felt, and the thoughts that I had, and how I felt. And when I read them, the dots were kind of joining for me. And throughout life, there have been pivotal moments, like struggling with conception, and the hormone imbalances that come with being a mum, as well as the pressures of working in investment banking and other stressful periods of time in my life, where psychosomatically things are going on in the body. And now approaching perimenopausal stages of life, the brain fog comes, or the emotional changes in me that I
and
sense.
they're not sleeping as well.
Yeah, they're not sleeping, all the different things that happen that I can't keep up with.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is I can feel them in my body as well. I can sense intuitively that there is a difference on how I feel on the inside. And so I can capture when I'm going to fall out of sync with myself, because the three aren't working together. My mind, my feelings, and my body are not congruent, or they're incongruent. And that has been, so far, that has been really helpful, because then I can do something different.
So you can make a proactive choice,
yeah,
rather than just keeping on going, and then burnout, right?
That's right. So for example, if the shoulders are getting tense and the head is starting to feel heavy and the headache is about to come on, I know when the shoulders tense up now, right, through practice, that there's something I need to look inward about.
Okay.
Is it that something nutritionally is not okay? Do I need to really nourish my body? Have I not had enough to drink? Or is it that life has thrown a bit of a curveball at me at that point in time, and I'm really stressed and I need to do some exercise, or I need to kick in the meditation? I'm not practice living holistically every day, but what I do like to do is a bit like a prescription. I give myself a prescription of what I need for that period of time of my life.
So it's a really highly developed sense of attunement with yourself.
Mm.
That's so powerful. And it's obviously like it's sort of, I think we all want to get to is a relationship with ourselves and a noticing. And that can be really hard in the humdrum of life, right? Like when you're on the treadmill of life and like you have to do a million things, and when you're doing a million things, especially, you know, you're working and you've got a family and you've got extended family and you've got children and you've got like all the different, you know, balls that people are juggling with, right? How do you then carve out time for yourself? Because self-care for me has never been just, oh, a bubble bath and everything. Yes, it's partly you can do something nice. It could be a way of relaxing. But to me, self-care is more, as you said, proactive. And it's trying to look at the whole of your life and, you know, on a macro level, the whole of your life, and see, okay, where am I depleted? What's nourishing me? Like, how am I going to support myself? Or I'm going to have a week where this is going to be really, you know, a tough week. Do I need to scale back on XYZ and just give myself time to rest? And rest is like a dirty word, right? Like productivity and the 5 a.m. club, and oh my God, like I can't do any of that, right? So for me, I've learned to rest by actually literally just resting. And in doing this series, as I said just before we went on, I'm learning through doing this series as well that, you know, how to schedule what, and I need to have time to rest so I can give my energy, my full energy to something. And so, yeah, like tell us a little bit about the things that you do to support yourself, and whether you felt any guilt, and if so, how do you kind of deal with that to allow yourself to nourish yourself and care for yourself to be able to, you know, live your life?
It's a really good question. And for me, simplicity is really important.
Okay,
because
tell us more.
I know that I can overthink or I can overanalyze. I appreciate the things that I've learned through my various careers to be over analytical or to be really kind of thoughtful and look into things in depth. So simplicity for me, I know, is very important. And I rely on one thing, and I think we can all rely on this one thing: listening to the inner voice.
Okay, and tell us more about that.
So that's the three things that we talked about. Listening to the body, not ignoring the little signals that it gives you when you have a little niggle or there's some tension, or, you know, and meditation can really help to grow that if that's not already in place, because the sitting still enables you to actually contact your body and see where there's a knot, or where there is some stiffness or some warmth or some coolness that you didn't know was there. So getting in touch with the body is really, really important. So I listen to my body, I listen to my mind. So if I, you know, when you train yourself to be as aware and conscious as possible by being present, you start to understand how often you're not in the present. You start to hear when you've gone into the past and when you've gone into the future, and how, you know, so through years of practicing this, I now am able to understand when that is happening. Sometimes it can happen, you know, maybe sometimes it happens for a while before I notice, but you don't know, right?
That's until you sit down to start to meditate, and then you're like, yeah, oh my God, I've got 20 billion thoughts going through my head. And actually, for people that are not used to meditating, because, you know, I came to it very late in life, I had assumptions about meditation. And the assumption was meditation is about emptying your mind. And so when I noticed thoughts, and my thought, it was like a buzzing bee, I was just, oh my God, I'm so crap at meditation. I can't do it. I failed. I don't know how to do it. And then I read Dan Harris's book, 10% Happier. And he said, and obviously he was taught this, that is not meditation. Meditation is, your mind will definitely go off into something. Meditation is about noticing it and then bringing it back. And it's the act of bringing it back that is what you're training your brain to do, because in the act of bringing it back, you're then more of an observer.
And there are so many tools, and there are, you know, I mean, I love Headspace, I love Calm, there are so many apps out there, especially for young people who, you know, want to use technology instead of, you know, doing it by themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
I find them really helpful and really useful. And so, you don't have to be in charge of doing it yourself. You can have something help you as an aid to do that. But the important point being that the awareness reminds you and helps you hear what your cycle of thoughts are and the loop that you keep going on. And then you're able to say, okay, I see I have a loop. I'm going to move on from the loop. I appreciate it was there for a reason, but I no longer need it, and I'm going to think about something else, or I'm going to do something else. And sometimes at nighttime it can creep up, especially right when you wake up and you start going into a trail of thought, and it just the hours whiz by, and before you know it, you've lost half the night. So, being consciously aware of your thoughts and being in control of them, and noticing who's entering your room that isn't actually there.
Tell us more about that.
That happens a lot, doesn't it? Like, do you not find yourself, ruminating, and then all of a sudden, your parents might be in there, or your friends might be in there, or your boss might be in there, and something you've got to do next week will be in there, and whoever that's related to will pop up, and all these people pop up in your mind that aren't in your bedroom while you're supposed to be sleeping, and so you can ask them to leave. You can make you can suggest that they come back at a more appropriate time of the day, preferably speak to your calendar about it and arrange it. So that's a good thing to do.
When I was working as a corporate lawyer, and I was like running transactions, etc., I would have really vivid dreams. And sometimes in the dreams, I would be working my way through my to-do list, all of the things that I knew I had to do. And I'd get to the point where I had, worked through, not done, but, like broken the back of like 3 or 4 really hard things. And then I would wake up in the morning and I'd realize it had been a dream and it's all still there. And I would wake up and I'd be so exhausted because, like my subconscious has been so feverishly working. So yes, I think that when you have intense jobs where you have to be like really on, it's so important to find ways to switch off. And one thing that I used to do in one particular job, and then I didn't take it into the next job, and I really saw the negative effects on me, was in one job I decided I was going to read on the tube. So not listening to music, I didn't have a smartphone. I was very late getting a smartphone, so I didn't have a smartphone. But not answering, emails, not doing any of that, just read. And I had a 45-minute journey there and a 45-minute back, and that was my time. And I saw how that was the one thing that allowed me to switch off and decompress in those 45 minutes, that when I came home, I felt in a different state. But yes, like then in the next job, I was literally on my phone the whole time, dealing with like firefighting, dealing with all of these different things. And then I'd, go into work, and I didn't have that break. And I sort of thought, oh, this is so important. Changing your state is so important. So like, what do you do to change your state? Like, say if you're kind of noticing, okay, I've got stiff shoulders, or there's something that's going on in life and I'm like a little anxious, a little worried. Is there like one go-to thing or a few go-to things that you kind of reach for because they really work for you?
Yeah, what, some of the quickest ones, especially when you're leading a busy life, there are some really quick ones, like having a mindful sip of water.
Okay.
If you actually taste the water, connect with the temperature of it, feel it literally going down your throat and into your body, the sensation on your tongue, the clean taste of it in your mouth. So mindful eating, mindful drinking is a quick fix. Breathing, you'll see, if you Google it up, there are so many breathing techniques, but the simplest of all is just being aware of your breath in and out. Whether you breathe in 3, 4, 5 and do all these other things.
Oh, the square, isn't it?
There are so many. I've got quite a few on my account. I'll share them with you after. But just noticing your breath in that moment, in through your nose, and out through your mouth, noticing your diaphragm coming up, realizing that the ground is beneath you and that you're sitting on the back of a chair.
Yeah.
So it can be a physical change of state, it can be a mental state. So you could come up with an affirmation that you want to use that suits you.
It grounds
I
you.
am loved, that grounds you. Yeah. So if you notice what resonates with you, are you a physical person? Are you in your mind sort of a person? So will an affirmation help you that you could maybe print it and put it up in various places so it helps you to, get present and in the moment. Or it could be you might want to do burpees, or you might want to do star jumps.
Or dancing, dancing in front of the mirror. Yeah.
Whatever it might be. So there are quick solutions that, you don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to pay for them, and you can do in front of people. And then there are other ones that, that take more time. But I think most of us seem to have a pretty busy life at the moment.
Yeah.
And so, splashing water on your face, taking some deep breaths, call someone, there's so many things you can do. But you can only do it if you have the awareness that it's happening.
And that you consciously give yourself, consciously and intentionally give yourself that time, because you know you're worth it.
Yeah.
And self-worth, we touched upon self-worth sort of all the way through. It's such a huge topic, and probably not the right topic to bring up when it's like 31 minutes, but I do want to quickly talk about self-worth even in just a little way, because for me that's been the thing that I've struggled with the most. And there's a big disconnect in how we feel inside and how other people perceive us, right? And I learned that disconnect when I first started speaking, and I'd feel so nervous, and my mouth would be dry and my heart would be palpitating, and I would think that whatever I'd said was like complete rubbish. And then when I would say it, when I would get feedback at my speakers club, feedback was that, oh, you come across so cool and calm and connected. Cool and connected. Thank you. and I'd be like, well, I don't feel like that inside. And that's when I started realizing, there's a difference between how I feel inside and how I'm like seeming to everybody else. Okay, that's good to know. So it's never as bad as you think. But the journey to feeling enough and feeling good enough, which I think is, in society, I think, it's probably the most universal struggle that we have, is that feeling inside. Can you share with us just a little something that might start somebody on that journey? Because we can't cover everything, but just even start somebody on the journey where they're noticing this, and it's kind of repeatedly coming up and it's troubling them. What would you say?
With self-worth, the self comes first, doesn't it? Yes. And so I think that's a good place to start. If there is, a self-commitment to self-care and self-love and self-nurture, then the self-worth, I feel, is bound to come as a result at some point. And
wow,
so
I've never thought about it like this. It's so true.
Because I think that, you asked earlier about how, when there is so much going on and there are so many people to be accountable to and responsible for, how do you prioritize yourself? Well, I think that the important thing, that the mantra to have, is that if you don't do what you need for you, how can you possibly get to all of those people that you're accountable to, or things that you are responsible for? And so it takes practice, and it takes commitment, and it takes patience, and some, calibrating to appreciate that there are some basic needs that you have to be accountable to first before you do the others. You have to prioritize yourself. I have to prioritize myself. Otherwise, I can't prioritize my children or my husband or my parents or my in-laws or my friends or my work?
Yeah.
And how do I prioritize myself? Well, if I'm present and I know what my body's saying to me, and I know that my mind's telling me it's overloaded, and that my shoulders are hurting, and that my feeling is not one of feeling free.
Yeah.
Well, all three, my state, my body, and my mind are all telling me something. So am I going to listen to that inner voice that we talked about before? If I can listen to the inner voice, I will have the answers to making sure that I do what I need to do in this moment to keep myself in my healthiest, my sanest, my happiest, and then everything else will follow.
That is really beautiful, and I've never heard it expressed like that.
I'm not sure I've said it like that before either.
But like, what it's kind of like, it makes me see how there's a parallel between self-worth and confidence in a weird way, and hopefully this will make sense. But like, just like you cannot think yourself confident, you can't wait to feel confident and then suddenly you're confident. Confidence comes from taking action, and it's in building, like doing the little steps along the way, that you then confidence comes as a result. And what you're saying is that by taking the little steps of self-care and paying attention to yourself and nourishing yourself, in whatever way you need to, whether it's the mind or the body, you, as a result of taking those little steps and doing those little actions, self-worth springs from that. Because by doing those things, you are showing yourself that you're worth it. You're worth doing those things, caring for yourself. And so if you're sitting back and waiting to feel good enough in order to do those things and take that time, it doesn't come. So you have to proactively decide to give them to yourself first.
This is it.
And then you build.
To give yourself, where do you start? So, that might be a question that you might ask yourself. It was a question that I asked myself. So I started asking myself questions. What choice will a healthy person make right now? Am I going to have the porridge, or am I going to have, the sugary Ritos? What will a healthy person do? Will they do this workout now, or will they put it off to tomorrow? What will a diligent person in their job do? Are they going to book that client in now, or are they going to send that email later? So depending on what it is that you're trying to focus on, ask yourself the questions that will demand the right answer and hold you accountable. Because then if you choose to say, okay, I'll work out tomorrow, then you chose to do that. You are accountable. I chose not to do it now.
And sometimes, like, it might be okay to work out tomorrow, because what you really need is, you need rest today, or your body's feeling a bit tender, and that actually I want to do something a bit more relaxing or nourishing, or sit on the sofa and wrap myself up in a blanket, or whatever it might be, right? It's asking the question.
It's the question. So your question might be, the question might be, what do I need right now?
Yeah.
What is my emotional state right now? What do I want instead?
Yeah. So what do I need right now is a beautiful question. So for anybody, I think, that's watching, that really has been struggling with feelings of self-worth and feels like they're in battle with themselves, which is how I used to feel for a lot of my life. Asking, what do I need right now? And you'll hear that voice, right? You'll hear something will come, you'll get an idea, and then you can give that to yourself, even in small increments.
A great book, a great book that covers the aspects of the little steps that you mentioned, which I thought were, spot on, is Atomic Habits. Have you heard of Atomic Habits?
James Clear?
James Clear, yes. And he talks about those incremental small steps that enable you to hold and maintain change of habits for a longer sustainable period of time, as opposed to, you know, taking on something major that you might be able to do for 2 weeks or 2 months, but will you be able to do it for 2 years? And so, you know, you're spot on with the asking the right questions. What do I need right now, for example? Or if there's a particular area of your life you want to focus on prioritizing, then specific to that. And the little steps together should enable you to really put the steps in that will bring self-worth naturally about.
That's such a lovely way to end. I have one final question, because we're at 40 minutes now. I obviously feel like I could talk to you to do another 3 or 4 episodes. But the question that I end all of these with, and I'm planning to end all of these with, is something very close to my heart, which is, what does finding your voice mean to you? And why did you want to be part of this series?
Makes me emotional, that question. I feel like in this last few years of my life, I feel like I finally found my voice. And I think for me, my voice is questioning things and having a different opinion and asking for more of
what you need.
Yeah. And so for me, this conversation with you, you know, a conversation to me is so important, because that's my voice. That's how I've been able to share my voice with my friends and my family. And this voice is going to go a little bit further. So I'm a bit nervous about that. But if I don't take a risk and I don't seize an opportunity, then am I really using my voice? So I thought I'd take the risk and take the opportunity, and it's been really comfortable. And I thank you so much for putting me to so much ease and allowing my voice, which I've been writing for a long time, to actually come out verbally. It's not been easy, but it has been fun, actually. And
I'm so glad.
Really enjoyed. Yeah, so thank you.
Oh, you're very, very welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad that it's been fun, because you know that before any of my guests like come on camera, like I've you know, done pre-calls, and I've kind of written out, you know, my mission and my intentions for series, and like literally one of the cornerstone principles was, I want people to feel excited to participate, and I want them to feel safe while they're doing it, and then I want them to have had fun, and you know, and I'm so glad that
you can tick all of those boxes.
That you feel all of that. Thank you so much, Darpna, for being part of it and for helping me kick off this series, which means so much to me. And I love everything that you've shared, and I really feel this conversation was a beautiful dance. And thank you so much for dancing with me.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
All right. Well, everybody, that brings part 2 with Darpna to a close, and we'll be back in the next episode. So take care, and thank you once again, Darpna.
Thank you, Lara. Take care. Goodbye.